Hi, thanks for stopping by the farm today. I'm Sheila, and along with my husband Stephen, we run Friendly Feathers Farm. You may know us locally from the farmers market where we sell things that we produce, grow, or forage here on the farm. As far as livestock goes here on the farm, we have chickens and goats, and it's the goats that I want to talk about in particular today. Why? Because it's kidding season. Kidding season is a really exciting time of the year for us because who doesn't love baby goats? So we want to take you on the whole journey from breeding all the way to birth. This is part one of a three-part series on our kidding season. So in part one, we're going to talk about breeding and how we go about deciding who we're going to pair up with whom. We're going to talk about timing so that we have the kids born at the optimal time of year for us. And thirdly, we're going to talk about confirming that the goat or doe has indeed been bred. So when it comes to breeding, we don't just randomly throw two goats together for them to make babies. We take certain things into consideration because we're aiming for the total package. And what I mean by total package is that we want the resultant offspring to have the physical characteristics that are standard for their breed. We want them to have a good personality, and because they're dairy goats, we want them to have high milk production. Now let's talk a little bit about the characteristics that our particular breed of goat should have. And two of the main features that are very desirable for Mini Nubians is a what's called a Roman nose. So when you look at them in profile, you will see a rounded nose. And the other thing is that you want long floppy ears that are close to the head. So I'm going to show you an example of two goats that we pair together to have offspring with those desirable characteristics. On the right is one of our does. This is Lupine. She has a wonderful personality, and although you can't see her in profile in this photo, she has a beautiful Roman nose. Have a look at her ears though. They're not ideal for the breed. So we pair her with a buck that has the physical characteristics that we're looking to improve upon. In this next photo, you can see the result of this pairing. This is their offspring. Her name is Shug Avery, and her ears are much improved as compared to her mother's. Now, once we've decided which two goats we're going to pair with each other, we need to know when to get those two goats together. And we know that by when our does go into heat. And we know when they're going into heat by the way that they act. They will stand at the fence and kind of call to the bucks. They'll do something with their tails. It goes back and forth. It's called flagging. And they'll make this caterwauling sound. And they just seem like they're miserable in general. But they're not really miserable. Does cycle into heat approximately every 21 days. This lasts from 12 to 48 hours, and this is when the doe is going to be most receptive to breeding. Many Nubians tend to be seasonal breeders, meaning that they only breed during certain times of the year. So now that we've decided who we want to pair up, we need to start paying attention to when our does come into heat. and we will track that on a calendar. And once we establish a couple of heat cycles, we then need to start thinking about, okay, when do we want the kids to be born? At what time of the year? And for us, it usually works best in March, just because at that point it's starting to get a little warmer, but it's still a little bit cool. But that is the time of year that works best for us. Okay, here we are at the American Goat Society gestation calendar, which can be found online. I'm going to go over here to breeds and change it to miniature breeds because we have mini Nubians. And let's say I've been tracking my doe's heat, and I know she's due to be in heat again on October 15th. And the year was for last year, that would be 2021. That would give an approximate kidding date of Wednesday, March 9th, 2022, plus or minus 5 days. Okay, so we've decided on a pair for breeding, which buck and which doe. We've tracked the doe's heat on the calendar for several cycles. We've arranged for the buck and the doe to have a date. Now we need to know the result of that date. Is she pregnant? We have 3 methods of determining pregnancy. One method is by a blood test, and we would either draw the blood ourselves or have large animal vet do it. The blood is then sent to a lab and pregnancy is determined that way. The second method is something called a P test. That's the letter P and test. And it involves collecting urine or using the goat's urine to determine pregnancy. And in case you're wondering if a human pregnancy test kit will work, it won't work. The third method that we use, and it's one that we've used for the past couple years, is what I call the wait and see method. It's probably the least accurate, but it is free. And this would involve just waiting to see if the doe comes back into heat after her date with the buck. So that is a good reason to track the doe's heat on the calendar, because then you will know on what date she would be due to come back into heat. And if she doesn't, it's a pretty good chance that she's pregnant. These are the 4 does that we bred this year: Titania, Rona, Rio, and Lavender. We did use that wait and see method that I mentioned earlier to confirm pregnancy. And 21 days later, after their dates with the bucks, none of these does have come back into heat. So we're fairly certain that they are well and truly bred. Well, folks, this is a wrap on part 1 of our 3-part series on kidding season at Friendly Feathers Farm. Let's catch up in part 2, where we delve a little bit further into our preparations for kidding season and possibly capture the birthing process on camera. Now, this was our maiden voyage into YouTube land, so we thank you for coming along on the journey. Any comments or suggestions on video improvement or topics would be appreciated. We'll see you in part 2. Say bye, Luke.